Yo, hopefully y'all are able to hear me here on this joint here. What's up? What's going on? What's good? That's right. We are checking in. It's the Boston Source checking in here real quick. You know what I'm saying? We are just here real quick, real fast. We wanted to, go over the recent news here from Matchroom Boxing. Of course, as you're gonna have the former IBF and WBA welterweight champion Jaron Ennis going on to face Uisma Lima on October 11th, right? It's just something there where we kind of like talked about potential bouts there for Boots Ennis over the past like few weeks. Shout out to my guy there, of course, Elder Boxing there. We kind of talked about this in previous videos or whatever it was. You know what I mean? As we said that Uisma Lima could be a possible opponent. But I wanted to just go over this thing here real fast and I just receive the email and all that stuff. You know how it is with the press release and that type of stuff there. So we're gonna kind of like go through this here, for a little bit here, real fast. There it is. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully you're able to hear me on in reference to all of this and things like that. So we're gonna go through it. We're here real quick. All right, so it says there, Boots Ennis lands WBA Super Welterweight Final Eliminator against Uisma Lima in Philadelphia on October 11th, live on the Zone. You got Ennis there back at Wells Fargo in his first fight at 154 pounds against IBO, a world champion. So it says Boots Ennis start the journey to become a two-weight world champion with the final eliminator for the WBO World Super Welterweight title against IBO champion Uisma Lima on Saturday, October 11th, the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia. That's live worldwide on the Zone. Tickets are pre-sale there at 10 a.m. on Thursday, August 14th. And then general tickets are available there at 10 a.m. on Friday, August 15th at Ticketmaster and Events 365. You had Boots Ennis there, making the decision to, move up and weight after unifying the IBF and WBA championships. There, you're going to have Uisma Lima that has a record of 14-1 with 10 wins by way of knockout, had the IBO Super Welterweight title, where he won it against Bati there in Canada. I'm not saying that first name. Ain't no way I'm gonna say that first name. Nah, y'all tripping if you think I'm gonna say that first name. Screw that. All right, and then he defended that IBO title there against Servantai Koopman in South Africa, right? So you had that, and of course you got the quotes there and stuff like that. So I wanted to see about going over first the rankings there within the WBA, right? So WBA had recently put out their rankings, right? And so this should be able to show here. You got Terrence Crawford there as currently the WBA world champion. You got Juventus Tejas there as the interim champion. Juventus Tejas has an upcoming bout. Therefore, it's supposed to be August 23rd in Orlando against Abbas Barau. So who is at number one? You got Juventus Ennis there at number two. You got Soslin. You got Jesus Ramos. You got Kurbanov, Agyarko, Madrimov, Katsarakis, Isaac Lucero, and Uisma Lima is there at number 10. They put Uisma Lima there at 10 when they put Jaron Boots Ennis there at number 2. So that pretty much like gave some folks the idea that Boots Ennis could potentially face Uisma Lima there. And of course, as I mentioned there, he is the IBO champion at 154 pounds. Now, you also have the thing there in reference to the WBC rankings where you got Sebastian Fundora there as the WBC world champion. You got Virgil Ortiz as the WBC interim champion. And you got Jaron Ennis there at number 1 there in the rankings. So you see Suri Boachuk there at number 2, Jesus Ramos at number 3, Bakari Samaki there at number 4. So, we have a number of these fighters that are out there and, could be potential contenders for a world title shot or could have the thing there in a position for a world title shot. Right now, you have Boots Ennis. They're in a position to compete for a world championship. They're particularly the WBA, given that he was the WBA super champion at 147 pounds, also the IBF champion. This one here, he was able to have the position to be at number 2, as I mentioned there, with the WBA rankings. And that way he would be able to face or probably fight for the WBA title. As I said, Juventus Tejas has a bout with Abbas Barau coming up on August 23rd. So Tejas wasn't available. Varao wasn't available. And you kind of like go down the list there. You got, Jesus Ramos. You got Muhammad Kurbanov, Kauman Agyarko, Israel Madrimov. Some of those fighters aren't going to be necessarily available. Thing with Jesus Ramos is, for me, I would kind of like see Jesus Ramos as a guy that could potentially face, Sebastian Fundora. Therefore, Fundora's next defense of the WBC title. You want to have those fights in house. You got, Jesus Ramos there. It's been fighting under PBC banner. You got, of course, Sebastian Fundora that has his win over Tim Tszyu. What was it, on July 19th? So you could have a bout between Sebastian Fundora and Jesus Ramos coming up there if the WBC doesn't have anything where they could order a mandatory challenge there. Sorry, Boachuk. We're not sure if he's necessarily available, or he might have something else lined up down the line. You also was mentioning who is it? Virgil Ortiz Jr. Well, Virgil Ortiz Jr. They're saying that they're trying to have him fighting in a homecoming fight. If I could show this here, it had this from your Ring Magazine. It's from Hans Demonstol here. So shout out to Hans with this article that was from some time back. Not soon after Virgil Ortiz Jr. had his fight against Israel Madrimov for that WBC interim title, right? Now, the thing is, like Oscar De La Hoya pretty much like mentioned that, he wanted to have Virgil Ortiz have a homecoming fight. So if you're going to have Virgil Ortiz basically having a homecoming fight, according to Oscar De La Hoya or Golden Boy Promotions, as you said there, I'm thinking about maybe doing a homecoming party for him in Dallas, fight a top 10 guy and then go after Fundora and then go after Crawford. That was, stated there some time back. Then where was he going to have that opportunity to, face Bruce Ennis, at least in theoretical sense? You know what I mean? So that was the thing about it. You know what I mean? You said Virgil versus Spence. Nah. Madrimov. Nah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's going to be in. They said Madrimov is available. I don't know about all that. Madrimov, I have to see about that. Because Madrimov there, in that particular sense, they say like, oh, okay, so you're going to have somebody that's coming off of losing to Virgil Ortiz Jr. You know what I mean? So that was the thing about it. My joint was, if Ennis was going to move up to 154, he would particularly try to go after Yoenis Tejas, who is the WBA interim champion. But Tejas, as I mentioned, has a fight with Abbas Barao, right? So that's out. Jesus Ramos Jr., if he's there at PBC and you got a potential fight that you could have with Sebastian Fundora, hey, that could likely be out. The other thing too, though, and this is key, as I mentioned with Virgil Ortiz Jr., if they're going to have Virgil Ortiz Jr. having a homecoming fight in Dallas, and this particular plan for Jaron Boots Ennis was to have a homecoming fight in Philadelphia, a number of these fighters that we see out here, they're not going to be, down for a bout against Boots Ennis in Philadelphia. We talked about potential opponents there like a Josh Kelly, and you saw Eddie Hearn. He's like, well, look, mate, I offered, I gave an offer to Josh Kelly, but given that he, has fought in these Riyadh season events, these offers that we give to Josh Kelly, he's likely not going to take because it would be much less that he had to fight in these Riyadh season events, which I wouldn't be surprised about. So it's like you're not going to necessarily get a really huge opponent there that's going to be in Philadelphia. If it was like in Las Vegas, probably something different. If it was like, I don't know, in Los Angeles or New York, probably something different. But if they say, hey, you're going to have this fight in Philadelphia, man, you might as well just, X out a lot of those opponents there that, could have been, either mentioned or possible there for Boots Ennis, right? So for me, it would either be like an Andreas Katsarakis or an Uisma Lima, right? That could be a potential opponent for Boots Ennis in his first bout at 154 pounds. And, the thing about it is that, it's kind of funny, though. He said, dog, hey, Dan Smooth, I don't do that shit. So I don't know what you're talking about. I really don't know what you're talking about. I don't think you understand what happens in boxing. Do you think, okay, here's my question for you. All right. Do you think that every single fighter that has won a world title that moves up to another division faces a top opponent in their first fight back? That's the question. That's the question. So with that being said, because I could bring up multiple examples where that's happened, where you've had undisputed champions. Oh, like Alexander Usyk. What was his first fight at heavyweight? Just saying. Okay. So that being said, you know, that's the thing about it. Shares a question there from Jesus M. Is Lima a ticket seller pay-per-view draw? This ain't gonna be on pay-per-view though. That's the thing about it. Like this is not on pay-per-view. It's gonna be live on the zone. It's not the zone pay-per-view. It's just regular the zone. That's it. I mean, we can go right back to it. I mean, I'll go right back to the whole thing with the press release there. It says, once again, Boots Ennis lands WBA Super Welterweight Final Eliminator against Uisma Lima in Philadelphia on October 11th, live on the zone, not the zone pay-per-view. So there you go. Right. So, with that being said, you're gonna have this be about, and as I've been mentioning with fighters all the time, you gotta be able to have like one of them stay busy fights or try to keep as active as possible. Bootson is having his last bout on April 12th there against Iamana Stanionis. Now this is his next one here on October 11th. Then you have what's going to be next up likely in 2026. So you got that there on the schedule. So you talk about Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman being available. You sure about that? Keith Thurman. How much would it require for Keith Thurman to fight? Basically anybody. That's the other thing. You know what I mean? Uh so is Lima a ticket seller? It doesn't necessarily have to be a ticket seller. Lima is not the person here. It's Jaron Boots Ennis. So the whole thing is, right, if Boots Ennis is good enough to have what did you say? Like a good crowd there once again at Wells Fargo Center. Of course, we had his bout there initially last July, right, when he was supposed to face Cody Crowley last year, and that didn't necessarily happen. He ended up fighting David Evangeline. That fight, you had over 14,000 people there for that. Then you had the rematch with Karen Chikajian in the same venue there. I think that one you had less people. You had around over 11,000, I think, for that particular fight card that was on November. What was that? November 9th of last year. So now you're going to have it once again with Boots Ennis going up against Uisma Lima here in his first bout at 154 pounds. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. So it says, boxers not being ticket seller. So that's the thing. It's not really about the opponent. Like, that's the thing about it. It's not the opponent. It's the person on the A side. Okay? That's what I'm talking about. So if you're going to have, like, say, for example, right, you have Canelo Alvarez. Does it really matter who the opponent is for Canelo Alvarez? No, not really, because people are there to see Canelo. Tank Davis. People are there to see Tank Davis, right? Anthony Joshua. They're there to see Anthony Joshua. So when you have something like that and you're trying to, build someone up in reference to that, then you don't necessarily have it to where it's an opponent. And that's why I say, like, even with that particular instance, like, okay, y'all mentioned those fighters, right? Y'all mentioned the Keith Thurman. Y'all mentioned maybe a Jesus Ramos, right? Y'all mentioned, I guess, a Virgil Ortiz or something like that. Do you think any of those guys? I'm gonna ask that question. Do you think any of those guys that I mentioned would be able to agree to a fight against Boots Ennis in Philadelphia? That's one. Two, if you say that those guys are available, y'all know who they work with. You'll think that they will be able to put up the funds or put up the money in order for a fight between that fighter and Boots Ennis to take place. That's the other part. So that's the thing you gotta like realize here when it comes to a lot of these potential fights that are try to be put together or whatever it is. Like, you gotta see what all the logistics are for that particular fight to take place. So, for example, if you're going to have a Boots Ennis versus a Virgil Ortiz, right? Would it be in Philadelphia? No. Will it be in Dallas? No. Would it be in Vegas? Most likely. But who will be able to put up that money for it to be in Las Vegas? Gotta take that into account. Same thing with like a Jesus Ramos. That fight would likely be a Vegas fight, and then how much money would be put up in order for that fight to take place. You know what I mean? So you got to look at all of those things, all of those intangibles when it comes to potential fights. It says Jesus M. What's going on, Sean Terrence? Said no, 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 no. He said that's not what I say. Then what did I say then? Thurman says same contract. Here's the problem. Here's the problem with this. And I'm going to say this here when it comes to Keith Thurman. We're talking about Keith Thurman, who's a former world champion at welterweight, moved up to super welterweight. Isn't he supposed to be a headline fighter himself? Isn't he supposed to be more established than the Boots Ennis? Isn't he supposed to be a guy that may end up being like getting paid more than a Boots Ennis would? So if he's supposed to be the guy that's more established, if he's supposed to be the guy that's more popular than the Boots Ennis, why is he the one saying send the contract? If Thurman, just being real with you, if Thurman really wants that fight, either one, he sends the contract, or two, he comes down on his price. And yes, Jesus him, yeah, Lima would be getting paid peanuts. Just being real with you, he would be getting paid peanuts. If I told you the whole thing with Josh Kelly and how they kind of like had that proposal or whatever it was, then yeah, Uisma Lima. I mean, you could pretty much like get who he's been fighting. I told you like a couple of guys that they said that he had fought or whatnot. But if you got a guy that's out there that's from Angola or something like that, you know what I mean? Like, and I told you a couple of the fighters that he fought, man. Like I said there in December of 2024. I said it before and I say it again. All right, he fought in Toronto against this guy. All right, he fought that guy. I'm not saying that name. Ain't no way I'm saying that name. Y'all tripping. All right. He fought Harold Matavosian, right, and fought this Koopman guy, right. So it's like three undefeated fighters there, but of course, they're over in like Germany or Canada or South Africa or something like that. You know what I mean? So here with the Boots Ennis, it's like, okay, I'm here to get them acclimated to the weight and all that type of stuff there. But it's happened on other occasions with other fighters in multiple divisions, including 154 pounds. So there you go. But a lot of people, he says just in the contract. But that's the thing about it. So, but what contract? What contract when you don't even know what the offers are? That's the thing about it. Again, we're talking about Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman, who, like, if you have an idea of what Keith Thurman way basically expect to be making in his fights, what do you think he's going to be asking for in a fight against someone like a Boots Ennis? Because this has been brought up before when both Boots Ennis and Keith Thurman were at 147 pounds. So there you go, right? And even with that, right, outside of Boots Ennis, who else is there where Keith Thurman could have a fight? Like, he's talked about potentially fighting multiple guys out there 154 pounds, but anything been secured yet? Not at this point. Not at this point. And if I'm not mistaken, I tried to see if I could get in contact with a couple of people in reference to that, represent Keith, but you know what I'm saying? Yeah, he said the thing is they got to see what's going to be happening with him in his next fight, right? He says poor fans in the tennis gotta watch that garbage. Hey, like I said, I mean, it really don't matter though, because my thing is this: you could have other fighters that go up against an opponent that y'all know don't have any chance against those guys, but it still don't matter. The people still attend, right? So, like for example, Terrence Crawford against like what a David Evansian or something like that over in Nebraska. Like people thought, like people were saying, like, "Hey, Terrence Crawford is going, to go beat up David Evansian," but that didn't, prevent fans from attending that joint. You know what I mean? What was it like? Canelo Alvarez. Who did Canelo Alvarez face, man? Like who did Canelo face that was like a easy lick for him or something like that? I gotta like look that up. You know what I mean? Because he's had a couple easy licks himself, over the years, and people still like went out there and attended. You know what I'm saying? Like Abney Yildirim. You know what I mean? Or Rocky Fielding in Madison Square Garden. Like when Canelo fought Rocky Fielding at Madison Square Garden, like how many people showed up for that joint? You know what I mean? But of course, Rocky Fielding didn't have much of a shot, but that still didn't prevent people from seeing Canelo Alvarez. You know what I mean? He said, you gotta pay me to watch to watch it or attend. I'm like, come on, man. My guy, Ring Walk Boxing Podcast there in the building. Yo, what's going on with you there on that front? But yeah, like I said, you got Uisma Lima there, as I mentioned, there, number 10 in the WBA, the IBO Super Welterweight Champion, and the IBO is not like necessarily affiliated with any of the sanctioned bodies that are the major sanctioned bodies in the WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBO. So you could probably have, the IBO title on the line in this, but it's also serves as a WBA final eliminator. Okay, where they said, okay, you got, the WBA interim champion facing the guy that's ranked at number one. You got, Jaron Ennis there entering at number two, and a number of these other fighters there. Pavel Sozlin. Who the heck is Pavel Sozlin? I don't even know. So you got a Pavel Sozlin or something like that. That is number three in the WBA rankings. That's at 12-0. That defeated Magomed Kurbanov there recently. So Kurbanov is ranked at number 5 in the WBA. Then you got Jesus Ramos Jr. Like I said, like if you got Jesus Ramos, that's pretty much like there at number 4 in the WBA, but like ranked at like number 3 or something like that in the WBC, you could have another opportunity to fight for a world title in another sanctioned body, or be advised not to go forward with, a fight with Boots Ennis at this point. You know what I mean? Hey, it says, yeah, Canelo versus Billy Joe Saunders, over in the Dallas area, AT&T Stadium. Williams Gold, well, that was over in Riyadh, so that, he had something there. And then, yeah, John Ryder, that was over in Mexico. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to my guy, LW Boxing, the Boxing Plug. Like I was mentioning, when I posted a video on the YouTube channel earlier in reference to opponents for Jaron Boots Ennis, I had, mentioned a few of those guys there, like a Josh Kelly, like a, Jesus Ramos, maybe like a Andres Casarakis, you know what I mean? And L Dub Boxing, just said, I'm gonna go out on the limb and say Uisma Lima, right? And I just put up the briefing on him, as I mentioned, IBO champion. I had the record they had, defeated a few undefeated fighters, and said, like, folks are gonna dismiss it. And here you go. You got folks on this very live chat dismissing it already. You know what I mean? So, and the thing is, I mean, I had this thing put up here there real quick, but the thing with Luis Malima, right, is that he had competed there within the 154-pound division, but also, had fights above 154 pounds. He had, been competing in the middleweight division, and actually fought Aaron McKenna for the WBC International title there at 160 pounds. That is his lone loss there to Aaron McKenna, but he's, won every other bout. You know what I mean? So that's what you have there with Luis Lima, right? So you got that thing there that's going to be happening at the Wells Fargo Center there. And, I've also mentioned that, you may have more fights that are going to be included on that card. You might have a fighter that is from the DC area that could be involved in this card as well. You could also have Khalil Cole added to the card potentially here, in this one. We had he was able to avenge his own his first loss, right? So he was able to avenge his loss, and now he could get right back at it here for October 11th at the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia. So that is partially what we're just looking out for. I know that Matchroom had recently announced another card for November 1st there, but they're going to also have Omari Jones there on that Orlando card, and Lenny Opera will take on Jordan Thompson there in that fight card. But with that being said, here with the Boots joint, having this WBA final eliminator, which he wins this, then either he would face the winner of the bout between Yoenis Tejas and Abbas Barao, or like he could get in position to be the WBA world champion outright. Because once Terrence Crawford faces Canelo Alvarez there on September 13th for the undisputed super middleweight titles, that'll be when Terrence Crawford relinquishes that WBA belt at 154 pounds. So you can have it to where, okay, we see what happens here on August 23rd. And then after that, you got this bout here for October 11th. And Boots wins that, and either he faces Yoenis Tejas for that full WBA title, or they can have it to where you have it outright. Shout out to my guy Terry Go in the building, man. Shout out to you, man. What's going on with you, man? Like I said, we just talking about this thing here with Boots Ennis. Of course, they had it announced for October 11th, Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia. And see if I could, get over to that. I have to, check the schedule, because I had said that I may, be down in Florida for that weekend, but nothing is necessarily guaranteed right now. But with that being said, we got immediate reactions to this announcement here for Boots Ennis fighting Uisma Lima, where not a lot of people aren't necessarily liking it, but you gotta look at the whole situation and things of what they have set up. If they were gonna have Boots Ennis fighting in Philadelphia, you weren't gonna have that much of that many choices for opponents. Like, you're not gonna have a Keith Thurman agreeing to terms to fight a Boots Ennis in Philadelphia. You're not gonna have a Jesus Ramos agree to terms to fight a Boots Ennis in Philadelphia. Okay. Some people are talking about Virgil Ortiz. That's not gonna happen. Okay. Especially when you have Oscar De La Hoya saying that he wants to have Virgil Ortiz Jr. in a homecoming fight in Dallas. You know what I mean? Which I have no issues with. If you wanna have something where you could build up Virgil Ortiz Jr., have him have that defense of the WBC interim title, that's cool. So once he does have a bout with another one of these top-rated contenders or world champions, then it would make for a really big fight. Like, for example, if they say, hey, we want to consolidate WBC and have Virgil Ortiz Jr. against Sebastian Fundora, that would make for a very, very big fight, Or, as I mentioned, if you're going to have Boots Ennis have this fight here on October 11th, and if he gets, like say, for example, if he gets to be the WBA champion, then you say, hey, now we could have that bout, and it'll be for a world title there at 154 pounds. You know what I mean? But as I mentioned there, you're going to have these, immediate reactions, given what's the overall landscape at 154 pounds. But yeah, the whole thing with Keith Thurman, not in Philadelphia. That ain't gonna happen. All right, just being real with y'all. Okay. So that being said, that's what I have in reference to this particular news here. As I mentioned, they're gonna have the pre-sale on Thursday, regular sale there on Friday, and we'll see how the rest of the fight card goes. As far as like the landscape of the 154-pound division, as I mentioned there, you already had Sebastian Fundora that defeated Tim Tszyu. You had the whole thing with the IBF world champion there in Bakhmut Zaliev and his whole thing there with Erickson Lubin, which there's been like some reports there that that particular mandatory defense might be out the window, which is really, that ain't cool. That ain't cool. You know what I mean? But if it's not, then hey, maybe they'll end up moving down the line. They got Josh Kelly as the next rated fighter out there. So if it's not going to be Erickson Lubin, then it might end up being Josh Kelly. So here with Josh Kelly, they said like, hey, he could have potentially been an opponent for Boots Ennis, but if he's gonna get like paid whatever he could have got paid for that fight in comparison to potentially facing the IBF world champion there in Bakr Murtazaliev, Josh Kelly will just choose Murtazaliev, every time, and it could be a slight chance that it could be a fight that could be in the UK. So there's that. But like I said, we'll have to see what's going on as far as like Erickson Lubin and Bakr Murtazaliev, because if they say like that IBF mandatory thing kind of like went out the window, then hey, it is what it is. But I did mention that if it was gonna be Murtazaliev and an Erickson Lubin, who would host the fight? Where would it be at? Who would be promoting it? How much money would be involved in it? All of those questions. You know what I mean? So as far as like that whole thing with IBF, man, I don't know. Shout out to Z Patino there in the building, man. What's going on with you here? Like I said, I mean, I'm just talking about, the whole thing with Boots Ennis and Uisma Lima being announced here for Philadelphia, October 11th, Wells Fargo Arena. All right. So another one of those showcase fights for Boots Ennis here coming up in October for his first bout at 154 pounds. Now, for those that, be catching the replay, you'll pretty much see, all that I've said. You can leave a comment, hit a like button, or whatever it is. But also, if you comment, like say who you think could have been an opponent for Boots Ennis that I haven't mentioned yet. Okay. And once you kind of like mention that, then I'll say, hey, I'll show you why they could or they could not have been an opponent for Boots Ennis. But like I said, overall, if they were going to have Boots Ennis locked in to have a fight in Philadelphia, then a lot of the fighters that have been mentioned as potential opponents, they weren't going to be able to take the money that would be out there for a fight between them and Boots Ennis in Philadelphia. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Smitty in the building there. He says, yeah, Boots is back. I want to see what the undercard is hitting on. As I was mentioning there, you could potentially see one fighter that's from the DC area that could be involved in this. We could see, Khalil Cole, who has been on undercards there for Boots Ennis' fights last year, that could be involved in this as well. So we'll have to see how that shapes itself out. But I just wanted to get that news in. As the schedule goes, we'll have Real Boxing with Coach Ronnie Shields on Tuesday. Midweek report on Wednesday. Pretty much going to be previewing the fight card on August 16th over in Saudi Arabia. That's going to be happening on the midweek report, and then we'll see what else we could have included on the Boxing Source podcast for Sunday. All right. But if y'all, have missed the last Boxing Source podcast, that's still, up and available online, either through YouTube or through Rumble there. But, that's what I got in reference to this. I'll be able to see if I could check y'all out later. Tito Mercado. As far as Tito Mercado, maybe. I have to see if that could be a potential fighter that could be on the card, but I'm not necessarily sure that would be one guy to kind of like mention there. But he could be at it. He could be at it. As far as like potential opponents for him, I don't know. Because, he's just, coming off of his win over Jose Pedraza. So you might see him on there. Since his last bout was in January, you might see Tilo Mercado as part of this Matchroom card in October. So that could be another potential fighter to look out for to be on this card. They're headlined by Boots Ennis versus Uisma Lima. So with that being said, that's what I got for y'all. Like I said, check out what we got here on the Boxing Source YouTube channel. A bunch of interviews that I had over the previous week. So if y'all haven't done so already, y'all check that out. Check out the interview that I had with David Benavidez. Interview that I had with William Foster III. Is William Foster goes up against Muhammad Yakubov on Pro Box TV this Friday. So y'all check that out. And all the other interviews there from when I was at No Excuse Gym or Hillcrest Gym or my conversation with Coach Bob Santos as well. So that's what I got here, right here on the Boxing Source YouTube channel. And there's like anything else that I might be able to talk about here, I'll have something to post on here. But that's why I got in reference to this particular topic, y'all. And until next time, I'll catch y'all later. Peace out.